Episode 6 of the HT podcast. It's November 19th, 2023. We're going to talk about last week's happenings for Humble, and we also have a special guest. It's Joshua Cox from an AFL fan podcast. We'll get into that momentarily. First, let's get into our mission statement and our safe harbor. So mission statement, Andrew and myself, Patrick, are to provide Humble retail investors the latest news, filings, and happenings in the most accurate way possible and without compromise. Our safe harbor statement is we are both investors in Humble. We're both part of the Humble community on Humble Social and Humble Social 2.0 or HS2. And we're both extremely passionate about blockchain technology. We are not speaking on behalf of Humble. We are not Humble employees or contractors. We're not insiders. We're not financial advisors, and we're not compensated in any way. Any reproduction of this podcast without explicit permission is prohibited. And we've already given that permission to our guest, Joshua Cox of the Rebound Off the Net podcast. This is your trusted home for Arena Football League news and content. You can check out Joshua's content, and I strongly suggest it. He's got a lot of great interviews with AFL coaches, AFL GMs, and owners on his Spotify, Rebound Off the Net. On Twitter or X, he's at ReboundNet, and his Instagram is Rebound Off the Net. Joshua, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Glad to be here.
Now, can I ask a question first off? What does rebound off the net mean? Because that could be a bunch of things from different sports.
Yeah, so in the Arena Football League, they play with the nets beside the goalpost, and so they actually play the ball off the net. And so when the ball hits the net, it's live. It plays off the net, and so that's where I came up with the rebound off the net.
So if you do a Hail Mary and you overthrow, your guy in the end zone can totally catch that and
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's a live ball.
Holy smokes. All right. We're going to get in some questions about arena football because that just blew my mind. So thank you, Joshua, for joining us once again. Humble investors are mainly focused on the stock. We're a Humble investor podcast, although we are not affiliated with Humble. AFL is obviously one of our largest partners with the largest potential revenue stream. And recently they just announced their schedule with Lee Hutton, their commissioner. It seemed like there's a lot of mutual respect from both the league and their technology partner. And I say this as a sports fan for the NHL and the NFL. I've never seen a commissioner talk about a technology partner the way Lee Hutton does with Brian Foote, which is very encouraging to Humble investors, but maybe very confusing to AFL fans. Our first question surrounding this is, the AFL, it's been around for a while in pockets of history. Could you tell us a little bit about the history of the Arena Football League?
Yes, it's existed 3 different times. The first time it started about 1987. A guy named Jim Foster created the league. He got the idea for the league when he was watching an indoor soccer game. And he kind of jotted down on a napkin the layout of what the field would look like. And from there, the Arena Football League was created. And so the first incarnation of the league would last from about 86 to 2008. And so to break that down a little bit, in the 90s is when the game became the most popular. There was 20,000 more fans at games. You had the Kurt Warner story. For those who don't know, Kurt Warner went from bagging groceries, becoming the quarterback of the Iowa Barnstormers. Went to Arena Bowl, lost that Arena Bowl, but he went on to the NFL and had a Hall of Fame career in the NFL. So most successful story, probably Arena Football. It was a big time for the league in the 90s. Video games started to be created for the league. The league was really starting to take off. So you hit about 2000, you started getting a lot of big name owners. Jerry Jones, who owns the Dallas Cowboys, became the owner of the Dallas Desperados in the Arena Football League. You had John Elway become the owner of the Colorado Crush. And you also had Bon Jovi become the owner of the Philadelphia Soul. So a lot of big names came into the league in the 2000s. The league continued to skyrocket off. They had TV deals with NBC in the early 2000s. They had a TV deal with ESPN later on. So a lot of national exposure, very well known. And then around, I think it was 2008, the league made some really bad business deals. Commissioner was overselling franchises, and the league ended up folding there during the hard financial times around 08, 09. It came back in its second form around 2010. They came back. A couple of the teams dropped off when they came back. So the original league, I should say this, the original league had a minor league. It got to the point where they had a minor league in the 2000s called the AF2. And so that league, when the Arena Football League went bankrupt, the AF2 actually bought out the rights to the league. And so the minor league actually became the regular league and rebranded to the Arena Football League 1, I believe it was. And so the league came back 2010. And then when it came back, did okay the first couple of years, and then just started to sputter off. It was really never the same during the second incarnation. Teams just continued to dwindle down. It was probably, I think even 2018, I think they played as 4 teams, which they had a high of 19 teams, I think, in the 2000s. And so it went all the way down to 4 teams in 2018. 2019, the last season, they played as 6 teams. And then due to some legacy financial issues, that some old players sued the league over health. I think it was a health insurance issue. The league couldn't pay it, so they went bankrupt again. 2019. So another company bought out the league a couple years ago, and now kind of to the point to where we're at now with the third incarnation of the league.
Thank you for that. That's a crazy history. So we've seen it like go from grassroots to big owners to not so much, and almost consolidation into the AFL2 league, and then bankruptcy from bad business decisions. What sort of like makes it different this time, do you think? Or is there a difference, I guess, would be a better question.
Yeah, I think the commissioners a lot better. I'm more excited about Lee Hutton than I have been about any commissioner in the past. We've had some really the AFL's had some really bad commissioners, and so really excited about Lee Hutton and Travell Gaines, what they kind of got planned for the league. I think one thing too, if you look at the business model, if you look at it specifically, they're playing in smaller arenas this time to start out with, so lower overhead. Hopefully growing to larger arenas down the road, but starting out in smaller arenas, so lower overhead. Their business model is just it appears it's going to be a lot better this time than they've ever have done it in the past. So very, very poor commissioners in the past, but I feel really confident about this, the people in ownership of the league now. So yeah, hopefully it'll be successful this time around.
What do you think about the owners and the grassroots behind the owners?
Yeah, there's a lot of great people in ownership around the league. I've talked to the Billings Outlaws owner, Steve Titus, talked to the Nashville Cats owner. Yeah, a lot of great owners around the league. Seem to be stable owners. They're in their market. These are not just big. These are not just people kind of from outside the area owning the team. This is people from within their market owning the team. So I think that's a big change. They're doing that with the coaches too. They've hired local coaches for all these teams too. So I think that's a big, or not all the teams, but most of the teams. I think that's a big difference because I think towards the end there, about 2018, 2019, you had one company that kind of pretty much owned the entire league. And so I think they're going more localized, which I think will be a big difference this time around.
Yeah, it seems like there's more incentive to keep it local. If you look at Oregon, for example, right, you have Thibodeau there, he's an NFL player that right. I think he was at the University of Oregon, and he's now investing back there. He's obviously got a long history there. He's an All-American. Is that? I mean, that seems like almost like an opposite approach of having Bon Jovi for some reason owning the Philadelphia Soul to people that actually are in the community that want to promote it, and then have like kind of, I guess, they got irons in the fire for their local community. Like, is that? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think also kind of add to that too. They're playing. They have a lot of smaller markets this time than they've ever had in the past too. So I think that being the only show in town, that really helps fan support. I mean, you still got Philadelphia, Nashville, still got some larger markets, but for the most part, a lot of these are smaller markets. And you look at like Oregon, they're not playing in Portland, they're playing in Salem. You look at Washington, they're playing in Everett, they're not playing in Seattle. And so they're kind of outside those major markets where there's a lot of other things going on to compete against it too. And they're kind of the team of the place. And so I think that's going to help a lot too.
Do you think that's going to put like more asses in seats essentially, because there's not more local attractions? Not necessarily that there's not local attractions, but because now that there's a team dedicated to this, not massive area, but this smaller population, that there's going to be sort of more loyalty there.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think there's been teams in Las Vegas and Los Angeles and big markets like that before. I mean, there's tons of things to do there, and so when you look at the smaller markets, when you have the team pretty much of the place, and there's not really a whole lot else to do. Like for example, Billings, Montana, beautiful place, but I mean, there's not a lot of big entertainment. You look at Wichita, Kansas. You look at some of these, West Texas, out in Odessa. There's not a ton really to do in these places. And so I think, being kind of the team of the town of the place, I think that's going to help a lot and build up support. Because, they're going to be on the national stage. You're putting a smaller place on a national stage too, with TV deals, rumored to be with an NFL Network and Amazon Prime too. And I think that's going to draw a lot of people in.
Yeah, I think I saw CBS as well for TV deals. I may be mistaken, but that's interesting. So, NFL has obviously partnerships with the NFL Network and AWS as well for their statistics. Mm-hmm. Now, Humble being their technology partner, I'm assuming would help with some of their technology surrounding statistics and whatnot, right? But the exposure, is there a market for another football league? We have college football on Saturday, which is massive. We have the NFL on Sunday and Mondays and Thursdays. Mondays and Thursdays not as important as Sundays. We have Canadian football. That's a joke. The Grey Cup is on tonight, which is the Super Bowl of Canadian football, which is kind of funny that nobody knows about. But like, is there enough room for another league? And how does that pertain to existing football fans? Right? Can we spend more time on the couch watching this stuff?
Yeah, but so this league, the AFL is going to run pretty much during the off season of pretty much most other leagues. So we're going to run from I guess it's late April through I think end of July, and so it's kind of like a dead time for the most part. You've got some other indoor leagues. I mean, the AFL's going to be a lot more successful, I believe, than these other leagues. They're lower paying and they're kind of knockoffs of the original arena football game. And so I don't think there's going to be a ton of competition really in that spot. I think you got the USFL, XFL kind of in that space. They're merging those leagues together. But I think they're going to be down to like 8 teams. And I don't know their business model. I don't know how sustainable that league's going to be when it merges together. And so I think you're going to get to a point where 4 or 5 years down the road, the arena football is really the only league that's going to be on national TV kind of in that time span. You've got baseball kind of going on in that span. But if you look at it, baseball they've done a little better this past season, but kind of dying off with the younger generation because it's a slower game. They try to pick up the pace of it. But, the AFL's a fast-paced game. You're going to see games scored in the 70s. I think it's really going to draw a younger generation in to the games, and so I think that's really going to help the league too, because there's not a ton of sporting competition during kind of that time frame.
No, that's a great point.
Joshua, how do they plan to attract these fans, and what is it, just for my own education, what is different of this arena football versus conventional football?
Yeah, so to answer your second question first, so the indoor game is 50-yard field. It's a lot more narrow field. You got walls up around the field. You often see players get hit over the wall. It's kind of a really intense game. You got the big rebound nets on the sides of the goalpost. The ball plays live off of there. So that's the biggest difference. 8 players on the field instead of 11. Yeah, players play both ways, offense and defense. Quarterback, kicker. I think there's an offensive specialist. There's only 3 guys that don't play both offense and defense, and so that's kind of a big difference. Less players. I think it'll be around the 20-man roster if it goes by the way it was in the past. So that's kind of the biggest difference in arena compared to like the outdoor game. But at the end of the day, it's still football. But
just less boring than normal football.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot more excitement. I know the way the original game was too, from a fan perspective, it kind of like baseball in a way too. If the ball goes into the stands, the fan keeps the ball. So that's kind of one thing that kind of similar to baseball too, from a fan perspective. That's I think kind of cool. So I don't remember your first question, so if maybe go back to that.
As far as attracting fans and finding the fans, and I know you said that a lot of these are remote type places where there's less to do. It sounds like the gameplay is much more exciting than regular football. But what do you think that the Arena Football League is gonna? Because and of course I'm the wrong person to ask because I'm not into any sort of sports. But the regular sports person, I mean, are they going to be able to? They have to find the fan, engage the fan, but then are they also going to do you perceive some sort of betting thing as well as what do they do, the fantasy sports and stuff like that? Is that applicable to something like this?
Yeah, they're going to have I know one of their partnerships is with BetMGM. There's going to be, I think, 1 or 2 more on that. So there will be a betting aspect of it. There will be fantasy with that. So that's going to help a lot, especially where we're at right now. I think, the league was really popular. If you look at the 2000s and go back when things were really well and look at the attendance, I mean, you had 12, 13, 14,000 average at these games, which is, I mean, pretty big number. That's more than you would have at most NBA games on a given night, especially during the week. And so I think I think your average probably arena football fan would probably be, that's from the original league, would probably be around 50 years old right now. So I think the big thing is drawing in kind of the next generation of fans. And I think kind of the high scoring, high pace of the game, especially, a lot of people don't have a lot of patience nowadays. So I think that'll really help the game as it's fast paced, high scoring. There's always something going on, always something going on the field. So I think that will help kind of draw that next generation of fans in, just getting them, I think, going to games and kind of trying it and testing it out. So.
Hey, Josh, I have a question. So when I was growing up, I'm 35 now. I have 2 little boys right now. I grew up when I was younger watching things that were absurd, like slam ball. I'm not going to compare slam ball to the AFL, but slam ball was something new. It took a sport and made it more exciting and more consumable. And then now I'm finding out that I think slam ball is going to come back, right? Because, well, I grew up on it as a kid and they're going to promote it to me. So I watch it with my boys, right? Is that sort of something that could be applicable to the AFL as well? I understand that NFL, I'm a Bills fan. I see all the TV timeouts. I see the timeouts in general and the timeouts for injuries. It's slow paced. It's hard to keep my kids engaged, but AFL seems much more fast paced, if you're doing rebounds off nets in the back, that's fantastic. You have walls up, people get boarded over those, just like in hockey. Sounds like it's way more exciting. And do you think that my general question, I guess, would be, do you think people that kind of grew up with the AFL are going to kind of come back to it as fans, regardless of the locations, and follow it?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, former fans, are excited about the league. I think, there is some uproars about, people wanting teams in certain places, and that hasn't happened yet. But I think there's a lot of, patience in that aspect too. I think the league's going to continue to grow, and we're going to see teams in more markets. But I think especially the original teams. I think we got like Nashville Cats, Philadelphia Souls coming back, Orlando Predators. Some of the historical AFL franchises. So I think to answer your question, I think in that realm, especially with some of the former teams that's been historical teams that's been in the league, I think that could be very applicable in that realm.
They've already announced some teams for next year, correct?
Yes, there's gonna be 16 teams next season. Yes, there's gonna be 24 in 2025.
Okay, and those are more the flagship cities, or are they just going to be dispersed on best case scenario?
So the ones they officially announced for 25 is Chicago Rush, which is an historical franchise, and then they're going to have the Arizona Bandits, which is a new franchise. They used to have a team in Arizona called the Rattlers, so they're kind of going back to Arizona, but it'll be a different team. But they're going to have Darren Arbett's going to be their head coach. He's like an all-time great arena football coach. He's won 4 Arena Bowls. He coached 15 years for the San Jose SaberCats. So that they should draw a big drawing a lot of fans there.
Where do the teams max out at? Is there such a thing as a maximum amount of teams that they could have? But if it catches on, is it possible to have 50 teams?
No. I mean, they're not putting a cap on it. I would say 30, 32 max. That's kind of, NBA, MLB, NFL. They kind of always stayed about that number, because I think you get above that and there gets to the point where there's just way too many teams out there. So I don't ever seen it going above 30, 32 teams. Just my opinion, but I would highly doubt that.
That makes sense, especially when you get to playoffs, right?
Right. Yeah.
Now you have the AFL has and you're not affiliated with the AFL. I just want to make that sure, right?
I'm not.
You're an AFL fan podcast, and we appreciate it. There's currently a 10-game season plus playoffs. Do you think that would expand, or in the past has it been longer than that, or are these guys just taking on so much punishment in a short amount of time that it's just not possible? Playing offense and defense sounds rough to me, but I'm also a hockey player, so I do that every game. So
yeah, they used to play up to 16 regular season games. I see them getting back to that at some point. I think they're just kind of starting out small, kind of building their way up. But I see them, getting back to probably a longer season in the future. Don't know if that'll happen for sure, but I think that helps revenue growth and with fan engagement. I personally think you need more than 10 games. So I think that's something they will get to back in the future. So as far as the playoffs, I'd say it'll expand too. As the teams expand, there'll be more playoff teams, probably add in some wild card teams. So I see that changing in the future.
There was a team that was sort of deemed as a travel team this year. Is that true, or is it up in the air? Or
there's been a lot of drama with that online. That's the Philadelphia Soul. I think from what I'm hearing, is they are kind of still assessing their arena needs. I think they will have an arena by the time the season starts. So we'll hope so in that realm, because that's one of the historical franchises. They had a huge fan base back in the day, and so they actually ran
huge sports town.
Their team, they started their franchise in 2004, and it actually ran all the way to the closure of the league in 2019, and they were the only team to make it to the closure of the league from then. So they have a huge fan base. They, had 13, 14, 15,000 fans in the Wells Fargo Center. So,
Wow.
yeah, hopefully they get back to that, because that was a great it's a great franchise. So, had a big fan base. So.
Yeah, I saw some people particularly upset about that. Okay, cool.
Yeah, I think on that realm too, I think it's just patience too. I think we live in the world where we want things really quick, and I mean, the AFL is working hard on it, and I just think with any new business, I mean, things aren't going to go great all the time at first. So I mean, you're going to have your challenges. So I think patience is necessary, and yeah, that's just all I have to say. So.
100%. What do you think about the partnership with USA Football? It's been brought up a lot by Lee Hutton, and he's even mentioned Arena Football USA, but also Arena Football Mexico, et cetera, et cetera. So I know that it's going to be an Olympic sport. It looks like they're trying to grow the sport internationally.
Mm-hmm.
Is Arena Football integral to growing the sport of football or flag football in general? Do you see that?
Yeah. So I think seeing AFL athletes in the Olympic Games will be really cool. I think it'll be great for the league. Kind of give that international exposure. So like to see the players there, that'll be awesome. I think the league will continue to grow. I fully believe Lee Hutton's vision. I think he has big dreams and big plans, and we'll kind of see what happens. But I mean, I think this would be a great sport in a place like Canada and a place like Mexico. Not as many. You got Canadian football, but you have nothing like this in Canada or Mexico or anything like that. So,
and if it's going to be Olympic, we're going to need that, right?
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I think that's going to be kind of long term down the road. I think it's going to take time to get to that. 8-10 years down the road, as far as growing internationally and hitting other countries. So, but I mean, I think it's good to dream big, and I fully believe that it can happen. So
that's great. Do you have any comments on the partnership with Humble in general? I know Lee Hutton brought up Brian Foote for some words, and like I mentioned before, I've never seen that with a technology partner. But like, what do you think would kind of separate the AFL? There's an app out there. There's a website that's already consumable. What do you think about that? What would separate us from say the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think Humble represents the future and kind of what things are going towards. I think everything is technology based, and I think Lee Hutton's very futuristic. I think he's looking down the road. I think they want to be the leader and kind of that world. Digital ticketing, everything that kind of Humble provides, kind of the app. I've downloaded the AFL app. I mean, it looks really good so far, and it's going to continue to get better. So. I think
it's powered by Humble, man.
I think Humble is going to be a great partner for the league, and like I said, I think they represent the future of what's to come.
You've interviewed a couple of team owners, have you not, Joshua?
I have, yes.
Who did you? Is there one that you enjoyed the most, or is there a common theme, reaction that you're getting out of all of them, or what are your thoughts on that?
So as far as ownership, I guess the Billings Outlaws owner, Steve Titus, is the only actual owner I've interviewed. I interviewed the GM for the Nashville Cats. So, I mean, all my interviews, I've taken something good from all the interviews. A lot of great guests, getting to know, point right now is just getting to know people around the league, getting fans excited for what's to come, and just getting to know the coaches, owners. I'm kind of going to have a broad array of people that's going to come on the podcast in the next couple months. And so I don't know that I have a favorite, but just enjoy promoting the league and letting people know the people behind the league and kind of what's going on, so, and their story. So.
How long you been an AFL fan for?
Probably about the early 2000s. I grew up a Dallas Desperados fan. They were owned by Jerry Jones. So that's kind of how I kind of got into the arena football game.
Wow. Sorry, I interrupted you, Andrew. Sorry.
No, I'm good.
Okay, Joshua, that's all the questions we had. We really appreciate it. You know, all of us are trying to understand the partnership and do our due diligence on our partners and how that's going to be a successful partnership for both the AFL and Humboldt. It does seem very close, like they're tied close to the hip here, right? So one success equals the other success, and their visions seem very aligned, both Lee Hutton and Brian Foote. So thank you. Can we bring you on in the future if we have more AFL questions, especially on developments?
Oh yeah, anytime. I'll be glad to. Yeah, just let me know.
Okay, great. We are recording this. We will provide the recording to you if you want to post it on our podcast. Joshua, that's all the questions we have for you. But we do encourage everyone listening. We do get a lot of people coming on the recordings afterwards. I'm always encouraged to post the recordings. They are available immediately on the Humble Social 2.0 and afterwards the YouTube. So check out Joshua's Spotify, Rebound Off the Net. On Twitter and X, he is Rebound at ReboundNet, and Instagram, Rebound Off the Net. Thank you, Joshua. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys.
Well, Joshua, you're great.
So we do have a bit more content tonight, and Joshua, I'm just gonna you're on mute. We're gonna go through some more things this evening, mainly because last week was financials. There was quite a bit of news both on the AFL website and the AFL application, and then there were some updates. Boring. And there was some updates on HS2 as well. But that was great. That was a great start to our podcast. And we'll have Joshua back absolutely if we have more questions of the AFL, because Andrew's definitely clueless, and I'm pretty clueless too. Okay, so let's take a look at the week in Humble. So Monday we had the quarterly report. I'm just going to touch on a few things there. Wednesday they announced the AFL website. Thursday they had the AFL app announcement, both on the Apple platform and the Android platform. They had the FinTech TV spot and the AFL schedule announcement as well. A lot of this consolidates the Wednesday and Thursday stuff. I'm not going to touch on too many things because one, we've already touched on a lot of it with Joshua. Two, because it's a lot of the same information is covered. So let's get into it. The price changes in volume, not really much to see here. We did have a 16% decrease and 1.1 billion volume, but we're still in consolidation phase. Pretty boring if you're a Humble investor. If you're accumulating, it's great news for you. Let's look at the quarterly report. If you've been following throughout the quarterly reports and you've listened to the podcast with Jacob, we know that liabilities are being drastically reduced. They're being consolidated. All those notes that are convertible are being brought into C shares. Even some B shares are being brought into C's as well. So that's dropped the current liabilities drastically year over year and even quarter over quarter. So take a look. Definitely, it's on the SEC website. If you want to deep dive into all of it, I encourage you to do so. But it's pretty much what we've expected over the last couple months, couple quarters as well, especially with the conversations from Pacific Line. Looking into the revenues, they have basically what's happened is the development costs have plummeted, whether that means the platform is complete or not. It does seem like the majority of the work on that, so spending the money on the development costs has drastically decreased. That's great for operating costs. We know that they've decreased their burn rate significantly with the help of Pacific Line as well. Professional fees have also drastically decreased. I would think that was more consulting, possibly around development as well, but that's yet to be seen. The last slide I want to show on the financials is just something that's way at the bottom. A couple things that I've highlighted, that in the last couple quarters, Brian himself has injected capital directly into the company in various ways, mainly cash injections. So 50,000 in the previous quarter, so September 30th, 2023, and the 9 months ending there. And then in the 9 months ending September 2022, he's done about 400,000 there. So he himself is also taking it on the chin here. So just keep that in mind as investors. Anything to add there, Andrew?
Nope.
Pretty standard stuff. Most of this stuff is located in all the quarterly statements. They're very detailed. They're hundreds of pages of long. I've never seen an OTC company with this much detail, but look through it. It's all there. Okay, so on the AFL website announcement, this was, I believe, on Wednesday. There's just a couple things I wanted to point out that we haven't covered already. The AFL website offers a variety of ways to interact with the league, its athletes, teams, and partners and fans. Now, through the mechanism, it's currently through the website, right? So how are we interacting with them? Currently, we're not. So I'm wondering if there's going to be some sort of social aspect there. I'm not sure, but it says interaction. Currently, it's a static website. I know it's in progress, so that's interesting. It also says that it's a home for season ticket deposits, regular season and playoff tickets, as well as fan experiences. So that is all transactional based things. If you're getting around season tickets, you may want to sell them. You definitely have to buy them through some sort of method. And then fan experiences, that could be, in my opinion, if you're having we've seen stuff with Brian Hayes, you get flown out, you get the dinner treatment, all that stuff. I'm not saying that that's going to be in the AFL, but a meet and greet, that seems transactional. And if we can do that through the AFL website or the app, that seems like it's a revenue driver as well. Sort of interesting. Andrew, anything to add?
Nope.
Okay, I'm going to hammer through this because there's still quite a bit of content and we're approaching time. AFL Shop, this is a big one, is also delivered by Humble Authentics. So that's really interesting. They currently have some hoodies and some t-shirts. It's just the AFL logos. So that's delivered through Humble Authentics. Well, if it's delivered through Humble Authentics, kind of leads me to believe that the revenue would also be driven through there. And then the cost of revenue would go to the AFL. This is also interesting because this was just announced with a UFC fighter earlier a couple months ago, where Humble Authentics is doing the entire merchandise, not only the verified merchandise, right? So not only the signatures and the game worn gloves or helmets or whatever, but it's all merchandise. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. But it seems like the AFL Shop is currently online. You can purchase products through them. It's through a Shopify, whether that's temporary or permanent going forward. It's still evolving, and we'll keep you updated on that.
Isn't there an interview coming up with her or something?
There is tomorrow. Yeah. So thank you for bringing that up. Tomorrow is a live signing on HS2, and I think Humble Social should also have access to that. And I'll come up to the updates on HS2 because there are some big developments there. But yes, live signing tomorrow. That's super, super cool if you're buying these merchandise items. So the AFL apps, same sort of thing, right? There's one big thing that I want to like point out here. So it says we'll include future integrations and partners. This is the second point, in areas like streaming, stats, fantasy betting, music, and concerts, and social media. Right. So we know that streaming exists because we were on the AFL site. You go in the AFL app, you could see Lee Hutton in the Westin Hotel and Brian Foote and all that good stuff. Stats is a big deal because that's coming from the league itself, and it's being represented in the Humble app. Super important for anybody following sports. Fantasy, huge money involved in there, huge engagement if there's not money involved, right? Fantasy's been around for a long time. I got buddies that spend more time on fantasy than they actually watching football. Betting, interesting that it was great having Joshua on, because he's saying that his information is obviously public knowledge. He's not affiliated with the AFL, but having MGM and having an interface to the betting, Brian Foote even mentioned this during Thursday's media event. He talked about betting and interfacing with them and having those relationships. Like the MGM betting is massive. It's huge in every sport, right? They usually have the biggest names endorsing it as well. So that's really interesting. Music concerts, I'm assuming, would be tied to the venue, which means that tickets would be tied to the venue. There's a lot of things that you could disseminate from that. And social media, which is where I get back to the previous slide. We look at the interaction. So how are they interacting with the athletes and the league and the teams, right? And how do they do that through social media? Was it through Twitter, or is it through sort of a humble social-esque sort of deal? We don't know. We simply don't know right now until it's released full-fledged, and there's still a lot of time to go before the AFL actually launches. So any thoughts on this, Andrew? There's a lot to digest here in just a few short sentences.
No, I really appreciated having Joshua on and explaining it, and it's kind of exciting that it moves faster than regular football. I might even tune in for one or two.
Great. I'm going to. I just remember a lot of, not a lot of, but the Starship Troopers movie had it in there, and that was like the futuristic version of football. And I know that was made in the early 2000s, so it makes sense why it was considered futuristic. So I'm excited. Yeah, big time. Different sport almost. Okay, so let's move on to the FinTech TV spot. I'm going to kind of tie this along with the AFL announcement. This is Brian and Lee. They're showing their partnership. There is a raw video that's posted on HS2 in the FinTech TV section. So check that out. It is available, I think, before on the FinTech TV. It does feature Lee Hutton, and they talk about international stuff. So if you look at the website for Arena Football, it's actually Arena Football USA, and then Lee talks about this, and then the schedule announcement about like Arena Football Mexico, Arena Football, and he starts naming off countries, right? So if there is a flag football Olympic sport, there has to be programs to support these in countries that want to participate. And there has to be funding for that, right? And potentially what happens is if the league is popular, you would get funding through that. You develop your system. It's much like any other sport, right? So example would be hockey. I'm going to use that example 100% of the time because I'm Canadian. But if you go to Sweden or Denmark or Finland or Russia, they have these massive hockey programs that are funded by the state, that are funded by sponsors. They build the organization so they can compete better at an international level. And there's also a professional league that's tied to that, because where are you supposed to feed all this talent going into it? So growing internationally, it seems, yes, it seems very ambitious. However, I'm certainly not saying it's impossible, especially with low contact sports that have high athleticism that are team-based, it's something that the Olympics are starving for, in my opinion. And I know you're not a sports guy, so I'm not going to ask your opinion. Great. Okay, the schedule announcement, pretty much same thing that was on the FinTech stuff. We did discuss this with Joshua as well. 18 teams have been announced. That was much more than what initially was announced. They're planning for more growth in 2024 and 2025. It seems like there's a lot of diehard AFL fans that are interested in this, which is great. That's exactly what humble investors want to hear, that there's going to be growth involved. If you look at the past AFL leagues, there were multitudes of teams, but there wasn't like a whole lot of soul to it. So growing grassroots from the bottom up, building a stable like environment for the team to be successful, and then gathering talent, and then basing your fan base around your teams, it's perfect, right? So interesting stuff at the schedule announcement. I'll say this one more time. I've never seen a league bring in their technology partner. For example, the NHL bringing in AWS for their statistics, or SAP, or Microsoft, or the NFL, bringing Microsoft or AWS. I think one does the surfaces, one does the statistics. They don't bring spokesmen from their technology partners into press conferences typically, because it's relatively boring stuff. But having Brian present at the schedule announcement, or like sort of their media kickoff tour, seems really interesting to me. It seems like it's a really integrated relationship, and that it's important to both for them to succeed. What do you think, Andrew?
No, and it seems like Brian's really heavily involved with it. And we've seen it in the financials, and we're seeing it in the AFL presentation. And I think that this is going to, I think there's a lot more to this than what we see. And I think it's going to be released, obviously, as the season goes in increments. But I think that there's more that goes on to this besides just a couple of signed gloves and whatever, briefs and helmets and whatnot.
Yeah, I agree. So there's massive incentive for the AFL, and this is in a filing. Humble does get more of a cut, and AFL gets more compensation from Humble the more that Humble is used as a ticketing provider. And more importantly, there is some stock vesting that happens based on wallet downloads throughout the years that the AFL can take advantage of, right? So it's in their interest to grow Humble as much as it is Humble to grow the AFL. So it seems like a true partnership. The AFL is interested in promoting Humble, which is why Brian Foote's in this keynote speech. They could use those shares for marketing, for pushing AFL far beyond what they exist, and their reach far beyond what they have, with money that they could accrue from Humble stock. But they can only do that if they promote Humble and ensure that they're getting revenue from ticket sales and from merchandising and from verified products and whatever whatever revenue streams that are we haven't seen yet. So it does seem like a true partnership in that matter, 100%. Okay, to look at our AFL roster to date, there's two things that are kind of up in the air. So the Minnesota Myth, they haven't been named to a stadium yet, so that's TBD. And the Philadelphia Soul, they're sort of a travel team, maybe not. Hearing the information that we just heard from Joshua, it's kind of up in the air. They do have a great fan base. Anybody that's into sports knows that Philadelphia is an insane sports town. So interesting. The sort of running total right now is 116,000 seats. You got to do your own math on that. Not every team plays itself every week, obviously. So you're going to have to find a home and away team, what the capacity is, how much ticket costs, revenue, all that stuff. If you want to start looking at revenue generation and do your own due diligence, do your own equations. Now, some HS2 updates, and I strongly suggest everybody take a look at Alfonso Senior's HS2 page. I think it is available to Humble Social users as well. I think they did make that available. But there is the ability to share posts to non-verified users. That was really important to share the live streams, I would think, from a technical perspective, to people consuming it without verified accounts. We're connecting to the wallet, things such as live streams. So that makes sense, right? If you have a Humble Pro account or you're doing a live stream like we're doing right now, it makes sense if you want to have a larger audience that you don't necessarily need to have them be verified. You can share that content. The live video and the streaming with chat, that was super cool. There was chat built into the stream itself, both on mobile and on the application. We haven't seen that before. I thought it was really slick. Anyone following with the AFL chat there, it was really interesting. It was cool to see a lot of AFL people in there, leaving their comments, Humble people leaving their comments. On the left-hand side of HS2, there's the blocks registry, so you can actually search in there for things that have been registered in the block registry. There's the marketplace, which I think would be important if you're going to extend that to, say, the AFL or individual teams, that it could kind of be drilled down to something of that nature, right? So like the Philadelphia Soul is only going to sell Philadelphia Soul stuff. Registry could even be the same thing, right? Tickets, same thing, right? They're now available on the HS2 platform on the left-hand side. Search as well. So we're now hitting like all-consuming sort of on the desktop app, that this is like a one-stop shop for what you're trying to accomplish. And then finally, recordings, and this is something that I want to cover with you folks. I know they've been extremely busy in the last couple of weeks to get the AFL online to ensure that they met the delivery dates of them going live, that the app was working, the live stream was working, the websites were working. So huge shout out to Alfonso Senior, their ticketing team, their technology team to get us recordings of the HS2 podcasts. These are available immediately after we end stream here. Once I stop recording, they're available on the stream under the meeting invite that I've created. So that's really cool. And then after that, I will have to basically download them and upload them to YouTube. But the best and the easiest way to consume this content is on HS2. And I'm going to tell you guys something, having to promote this podcast today across multiple platforms, like HS2, like HS1, and like Twitter, mainly because we have a guest that is mainly promoting their stuff through Twitter and Spotify. HS2 was easily the most informative. It was the cleanest, and it was the most descriptive of what we were trying to accomplish in promoting our task. And I'm not trying to like pump that or anything. It just was way easier for me, Andrew. Anything else to add on this one before we wrap it up?
No, I don't think so.
Wonderful. So if you want to get in contact with us, DM us through HS2. Use the platform. It's phenomenal. Seriously, it makes my job so much easier. Recording is going to be right after this. Tag us at the HG podcast on Humble Social or HS2, or join the H2 podcast group on HS2. With that being said, Andrew, anything to add before we close the call out?
Nope. I think that's good. Good show.
Thanks, everyone. We're going to stop recording, and we'll see you next Sunday.
Game on.